Welcome home, brave heroes. I am Amalgam Ash, and this is HeroQuest. And today, I want to share with you my thoughts on the path of the Wandering Monk. That's right, this is the Wandering Monk podcast video. We're going to be talking about the latest in Avalon Hill's line of HeroQuest Hero Collection character expansions, being the Wandering Monk, or the Monk Hero, from the Path of the Wandering Monk character expansion. This has been revealed at Gen Con this year at Avalon Hill's booth. It should be available for pre-order. This video is actually being recorded the opening day of Gen Con using photographs that I had graciously been given permission to use from Andrew W., who posted these on the Facebook The Old Inn group. Thank you again, Andrew, for your very kind contributions and for your foresight to share these lovely photographs. And I honestly did not think we were going to get any information about these after the Reddit post leak from Lord Drucifer, who discovered that this expansion and 3 others were, well, named and available for viewing on distributors' sites according to his local friendly game store. So really cool information, and suddenly, bam, it's here. The Path of the Wandering Monk is simply here. And now those leaks kind of make sense because it was so close. It was so close. We had no idea we were this close to actually being able to order it, and we are. This is a podcast episode, so there's going to be minimal editing. There's just going to be the bare minimum. I'm going to talk. I'm going to be candid. I'm going to be honest with you. I have a series of points that I want to hit. And all of this is stuff that I didn't have time to talk about during the reveal video that I did when I discovered this. So one more shout out and thank you to Colin and Geek Gone Giddy for letting me know about this. If they hadn't, I was going to be very late on it. Thank you guys so much. This is absolutely your win. And a huge thank you to Andrew W., who, if he hadn't posted pictures, we would not be hyped about this as early as we are. So, thank you guys again. And now, onward. Please listen to this if you want. I just aim to be background noise. We're not going to do a lot of visual, just my face here, and then like this picture and another one with the cards. We'll be looking at those. I love this presentation. I love how these figures are packed in the box. I love the scroll at the bottom. It's wonderful. Gosh, they are so cool. The packaging, Avalon Hill really outdo themselves on the packaging. They just get better and better at it. It's nuts. Anyways, I mean, I don't care what game this would be, what miniature these would be, whatever the name of it is, the packaging and the presentation is just nuts. You just knocked it out of the park, guys. You did great. The Path of the Wandering Monk is a hero collection. It is a character expansion. It comes with what we have come to expect from similar character expansions. It's the 3rd official character expansion, the first being the Commander of the Guardian Knights, which was of course limited only, and we got the translated version with Rise of the Dread Moon as a bonus, I would say. The second being the first retail, so commercially available, Rogue Heir of Elathorn. And now the Monk is the 3rd. The Monk Hero is what we are looking at here. We are looking at a male and female presenting version. We have our 2 different monks, just like we've had 2 different gendered heroes in the packs prior. We have 2 very unique and different sculpts to represent each one, as well as beautifully illustrated character cards, the backs of which we cannot see. They typically don't put the back of the card where we could see it, so we're left to guess at what kind of limitations or restrictions that this character might have in regards to armor, as well as their flavor text that introduces them to the game of HeroQuest. We also get a lovely scroll, which is printed on both sides, the front of which looks like an advertisement for the World's End tournament. The text at the bottom of this advert reads, "Warriors, heed the call and test your mettle for glory and gold." So we'll talk more about the World's End tournament and the implications that has on our beloved HeroQuest here soon. In this next picture, you can see that this comes with, well, there are the 2 character cards plus 10 more cards on the table. However, I strongly believe that just based on the text of the cards alone, this is actually 5 cards. And without seeing what equipment we might get, which I'm not sure that we're going to get any equipment with this hero at all, I would say that, I actually don't think we will, that this is only going to come with these 7 cards. 7. We have the 2 monk cards, we have 4 elemental style cards, and then we have the elemental style explanation card, which is in the bottom left. So I think we're just going to get these 7 cards. This is priced MSRP $23.99, I think, which is pretty high. A viewer made the point that these things typically do start out pretty high, and then they drop down. And that's one of the things I talked about in a previous podcast episode, the one that I recorded yesterday morning, actually, just before I saw the reveal. And that video won't see the light of day now because I made a lot of points there that no longer apply because there was a lot of speculation. There was a lot of which direction are we going, and I didn't want to guess or assume, rather, that the monks would be in the Far Eastern style that they do have, because there are other types of monks. There are the Robin Hood type friars. There are other kinds of monks that could have been suitable for use in this fantasy game and made to be competitive. So I held off on that. Now I can talk about the Far Eastern element, so I don't need to post that other video. This video will be in the podcast video now. Do note that I am going off the text on the cards when I say that there's only going to be 7, because let's read the instruction card in the bottom left corner. The monk uses elemental styles, martial abilities inspired by the elements of air, earth, water, and fire. All right, that's pretty, I won't say obvious, it's pretty intuitive. The cards are colored very well. They're very easy to look at and not even have to read any of the text to know what element group they would belong in. But the back of the elemental style card says that each elemental style contains 2 techniques that can be found on either side of its card. Once per turn, choose 1 technique to activate. After you use a technique, that elemental style is exhausted. So we are looking at 8 cards here that represent the techniques, but because of the wording on this card, I would say that these are, it's pretty clear to me that these cards are actually just 2 sides of the same card. Now that's kind of too bad. I think it would have been great to have the 8 cards and then give them all a unique back that says something like elemental styles, and maybe it's not too late for them to do that. After all, I do think that we're looking at a prototypical version of this, and the reason that I say that is because we have an asterisk next to the 1 under the attack dice property of the male presenting monk's character card, and we don't have that asterisk on the females, and so far they've never ever treated the different gendered heroes differently. We've always gotten the exact same rule set for both, same stats, same mechanical ability, everything. Only the appearance has been different. So I really think that this asterisk is going to make its way over onto the other card. And the text on the bottom is the exact same as well, so it would actually make no sense to not refer to this text, which has the asterisk denoting that it's being referenced above. And that text, of course, does say, when attacking unarmed, roll 1 additional attack die. There we go. I had to squint. The text is not clear, but it's pretty obvious that that is what it says, in my opinion. Our attack dice are 1. So if you're rolling unarmed, and you should be usually rolling or attacking unarmed with this character if he doesn't come with any equipment, and I don't think he does, then you're actually going to roll with 2 attack dice and not 1. The reason that I think they decided to go ahead and put the 1 on here, it's pretty pointless, right? This character is never going to attack with 1 attack dice. They're actually never going to attack with 1 attack dice unless they're using a weapon that uses 1 attack dice. Is because they are incentivizing you to use them unarmed, and because typically heroes, when they are unarmed, they only roll 1 attack dice. This hero is not the same. This hero rolls 2 because they are proficient in unarmed combat. They don't need steel broadswords. They don't need war hammers. They are ready to fight with just their fists. So that's a really cool detail and a really cool feature. A bit strangely redundant in the wording down here because of scenarios in which these heroes would realistically find themselves in while you're playing. but nonetheless, very, very good. The defend dice being 3, they are very defensive heroes. They can go out and very easily defend. If we don't get very many limitations on their defense, then I think that they're balanced. They're good. I do think that, and I've already seen comments that, I've seen comments on both sides about the scalability of the hero. We'll actually talk about that as well here in just a second. But let's talk about the sculpt. Let's get a closer look at this sculpt before we look at the ability cards. The sculpts are beautiful in my opinion. They are really, really pleasing. The sculptor did a great job. It is evident that they are monks with a Far East style. The style is pretty vague. It's just one that brings to mind Far Eastern culture in a vague way. It could be Chinese inspired, it could be Mongolian, it could be to some degree Japanese inspired, but it is just classic fantasy Eastern style. And that is, in my opinion, great. It doesn't appropriate any sort of culture. It is simply an archetype. And I think that is great. So our male presenting figure, he is in a martial arts stance. He is ready to strike something. He is in a pose that is in the midst of combat, perhaps training, but still ready. He's pretty buff. He's shirtless. You can see a lot of detail in the muscles. He is wounded. Well, at least he has suffered wounds in the past. He has got some scar tissue on his chest. Going down pretty bad scar. Looks like that he takes his training and his role very, very seriously. Whatever it is that these monks defend, if they study at a temple, or perhaps if it's just disciplinary in the art of combat, they take it very seriously. The bottom half, you can really appropriate the style to any culture you'd like. It's very vague. There's a lot of flowing big pant. There's a waist wrap that hangs down in the front, and there's a short sword at the monk's side, perhaps a dagger. You never know. The rogue had pretty big daggers. They were really big daggers. But anyway, the female monk is an entirely different aesthetic. Same style, really. Same choices that make her appearance congruent with the rest of the HeroQuest style, but with the Far Eastern flavor. She has more flowing robes. She is dressed a lot more conservatively. She has clothes that have wide open sleeves, flowing bottoms, so she has free and full movement to be able to just dance across the battlefield gracefully. She is depicted with a staff. It looks like a bow staff. It looks like it could be made of bamboo. It looks segmented, and this is also in her character art. She may not come with this staff, or perhaps this is equipment that we're not seeing on an equipment card that's not here on the table. And perhaps they have the ability to attack farther with this staff if they can get it. Now, I don't know. I think it's just going to be part of the appearance myself. I don't think that we're getting this as equipment. I think it is just a depiction. So I wouldn't really take it too seriously one way or another. It is very nicely presented though. The sculpts look great. Now the cards. Go back to the other picture. And I may have said it, I'm not going to be doing a lot of visuals in this video. It's just my face and these two pictures kindly provided to the Old Inn by Andrew W's. Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you so much, Colin, for giving me the information about Andrew's posts so that I could cover this as early as possible. This channel really is, it's you guys, it's not mine. So big win for you guys, the both of you for sure. And a big win for Avalon Hill as well for creating a presentation that is just beautiful. Both their broader presentation as well as this one. We have our 8 ability cards. I'm using that term quite colloquially. I'm just using it sort of as it was or has been used with every hero collection we've gotten so far and every hero we've gotten so far, save for the ones that use magic, spells. These abilities, there are 4 suits or 4 elements, and then there are 2 techniques for each. And the way that this hero is played is that you activate one of these, any one of these that's not exhausted. We'll talk about exhaustion here in a second. And some of these count as actions, some of them do not count as actions. and you can use these in addition to taking your action. So, for example, Tidal Surge. When it's your turn and you're playing the monk, you can activate this technique on your turn to split your total movement roll before and after your action. And after use, the elemental style of water is exhausted. All of these cards are going to have the same text at the bottom. After use, the style is exhausted. It means that you cannot use this style twice in a row. So you have some strategizing to do as far as which moves to use when. Which ones do you want to save up in your back pocket? Which ones do you need to use now in the midst of battle? And which ones do you want to try to conserve while you are battling so that you have access to them in case you need to come in clutch? But anyways, this technique, if you use it, it is implying that you have an action to use. Now, why would this be the action if it's implying that you have an action to use? So to me, this reads very clearly, because I can't even think of an alternative. You use this card, you activate this elemental style, then you roll your movement dice, or perhaps you can roll your movement dice first and then activate the style. There may be further rules on that, perhaps on the back of either of the elemental style cards in the lower left corner, because we might be looking at two sides of the same card, or we actually might be looking at two separate cards there. And then you will split your movement up. It doesn't say how to do this. It doesn't say contribute one die, then do your action, then contribute the other. Perhaps it is your choice as the hero. Perhaps this is one instance where the hero actually has a little bit more pull than Zargon, which I know is going to be hard for a lot of you Zargons to hear, but I've always been in the camp. I've always been in the camp, and I always will be firmly. You can't be Zargon if you don't have a table of heroes. So make sure your game is fun and you're not there just to be a rock star. That's a video for another day. That's actually a podcast for another day. I might have a couple of guests in mind for that one. Anyways, you'll activate this technique on your turn. You'll split your movement before and after your action. So you'll activate the technique, roll your movement dice, move part way, use an action, which would be anything, searching for traps, attacking a monster, and then you can continue your movement. A commenter in the last video talked about how the fourth suit here, air, water, and earth elemental styles, must be exhausted before activating the elemental style of fire. This adds to the strategy, and I actually really like that they put this in here. They didn't just give you 4 suits. They didn't just give you 8 choices. They gave you 6, and they said, if you do these 3 styles, any combination, any order, but you exhaust them all, you'll get access to this 4th one. And you can do one of these, and then you'll do the whole thing over again. It makes every playthrough with the monk a choice of style. It's really, really cool. I actually really like that. I know that some people have talked about complexity, and we'll talk about complexity soon. But right now, I want to describe this mechanic. The cards have to be activated, and you can only activate 1 card per turn. So you'll have to activate this on a turn. On your next turn, you'll have to activate one of the other 2. On your next turn, you'll have to activate the last one if you want this fire ability to be activatable. You do, of course, have the option. We can read the text at the bottom of the Using Elemental Styles card. It is obscured, but it does say, if there are no monsters in your, I would say, line of sight at the start of your turn, you can recover 1 elemental style. This might actually say recover all elemental styles. I don't know. It might say that. It might say recover 2 elemental styles. It might say recover 3. But I think it probably says recover 1. And then you get to choose which one of these to recharge, to come back. And it doesn't say necessarily that this takes up your ability to activate. So perhaps you can unexhaust one and then activate that same one. It would seem that you could do this ad infinitum, and then that would kind of make the exhaustion mechanic irrelevant. So I'm really interested to see what is on the other side of this card. What's the remaining text? And what is especially here next to the graphic of the cards? I do think that you'll spend your turns using each of these 3, and then the 4th one, because you can only activate 1 of these per turn. And then on your 4th turn, at minimum your 4th turn, you could activate the fire. So all of these suits, all of these elements, they've got two sides to them. And I said that a viewer commented, I was responding to the comment talking about the fourth style, because the viewer thought that it might be possible just to use all three of these in one turn and then use your fire on the next turn, but you can only activate one card. So at risk of sounding like a broken record, I'm going to go ahead and move away from that now. But on both of these, on both sides of each card, you do have a technique. So some of these are situational. Some of them require things to be there before you can really use them in a valid way, such as Soaring Dragon. Automatically succeed when jumping over a trap. After use, the elemental style of air is exhausted. If there are no traps, you won't be able to use Soaring Dragon. Well, you will still be able to use Eye of the Storm. As an action, something attack enemies. There may need to be enemies on the board for you to use Eye of the Storm. So you do have a possibility where you could be in a situation where there needs to be enemies or traps for you to exhaust the style of air. So that's interesting to me, before you would be able to use the style of fire. That is interesting to me. That's going to require even more strategizing and planning. If you're unfamiliar with a quest as a hero, you may decide to keep these up in case there are traps or enemies that need their use, that facilitate their use in a way that helps out the party, or you may decide to try to keep them in case there is an enemy or a trap that's more powerful than what you're facing now, in order to be the most valuable. But in doing so, you risk not being able to use your fire elemental styles. That is really, really interesting. So this character can be played a variety of ways. So let's talk about the scalability. If we have restrictions on this character's armor, then people are going to talk about, have already likely commented on their lack of scalability and how you're not going to be able to make them any more powerful, and how they're already powerful from round one. Round one, fight from dungeon one. And that's valid. But then the opposite argument is, if they can be scaled, they're already OP from the beginning because they have all of these different abilities and styles that are so bone-crushingly powerful and effective. Even if some are situational, they can just fly over pits. They can just split their total movement before and after their action. They can roll 2 additional attack dice on an unarmed attack. And you can do that every other turn. That's if you get into a situation where there's a monster in your line of sight and you use this, and on your next turn there are no monsters, and so you recover it, and then on your next turn there's a monster, so you use it. Strength of Mountain, roll 2 additional attack dice on an unarmed attack. If you're playing an unarmed monk and the card already incentivizes you to do that, then you're rolling 4 attack dice. You are powerful, but it's a situational power. So I see them as valid, but I don't agree with either point. I don't agree that the monk is already OP, because this isn't necessarily going to be something you can use every turn. You can use it while, the first monster you come across, and then you can't get this back while you're still in combat. You've got to rely on your other styles or other actions. As easy as it may be to do those other actions and styles, especially when you have a bunch of heroes with you helping you fight the monsters, it may be a challenge to get these back while you are in the midst of combat. Most combats don't last too terribly many turns. There are a few that drag out if the heroes are kind of playing round robin or running around not being super effective, or running around opening doors perhaps. But you still could very much have 2 very different players with 2 different play styles, that one of them is playing the monk optimally, they're being meta, they're telling the other heroes where to go, what doors to open. I hate to think of that possibility. Zargon, you know what to do to put the kibosh on that, right? And the other one is just running around, opening doors, being silly, not really trying to use the abilities to their utmost effectiveness. Both of these player types exist, and we can always train both of them to come closer to the middle. But scalability, as far as that's concerned, I do believe the monk will probably be able to use weaponry. I mean, there's probably not going to be a limitation on what they can equip, so I'm sure that you'll be able to grab a battle axe and still be able to use all of these abilities and still be able to take advantage of their defend dice, their natural defend dice of 3. They do only have 6 body points, so I mean, I say only, 6 is actually a respectable number, but if they get hit 6 times, they're out. And I'm not seeing any ability necessarily that heals the monk. So without that heal, we are looking at a purely DPS character. I want to talk really quick about Burning Spirit. The text on the Burning Spirit card, as an action, here are the words we can see. It's very obscured and it has a very detailed description, but here's what we can see. As an action, energy from beam may and continue closed door takes 2B, probably body points. This is a Burning Spirit, huge energy blast coming from your warrior's chest that evidently could go through closed doors. That is nuts. I love that. That is so crazy on the HeroQuest board. That's crazy. That's nuts. So scalability, I'm certain, actually quite certain, that you're going to be able to, I'm willing to eat crow on this. I hope I'm not wrong, because I would hate for the monk to not be as customizable or as scalable as other heroes. But I'm quite certain, I feel quite certain that the monk will be able to equip weapons. There may be a limitation on what weapons they can equip, but I feel like they'll be able to equip weapons. Having a bow staff would be really cool with this character. Now, the scalability of armor. I don't know if they're going to have a limitation on their armor. I think it's very unlikely they won't be allowed to wear plate. Something like that is going to be a limitation. I can just predict that much. Or if they are wearing plate, there's going to be a strict limitation on what happens to them while they have the plate equipped. Perhaps they won't be able to use elemental styles. Something like that I could see being very fair, kind of ingrained in the text as well with the theme of the hero, not just being a cookie cutter mechanic. It's something I actually love about this character. If you put any other context to these abilities on the character, it would make a little bit less sense than if it were a monk, unless you really, really worked hard at ingraining it with lore and mechanical ability. And if this monk had any other set of skills, it wouldn't be as interesting. If it had just the 3 abilities, it would not be, to me, as interesting as what's going on here. This is introducing a lot of new stuff into the game. All right, so the scalability, that could be still up for debate. Talking about other expansions, I don't think that the lore that we're seeing here, the World's End Tournament, has anything to do with the expansions that are coming up. I don't think we're going to see anything about it in Prophecy of Talor. I don't think we're going to see anything about it in Against the Ogre Horde. We're not going to see anything about it in the Spirit Queen's Torment. I'm not sure that the World's End Tournament even has a place in an upcoming expansion, but it is entirely possible that it does. Avalon Hill has stated publicly that yeah, we are generally 18 months to 2 years ahead on what you guys even see. And if we are seeing Prophecy of Talor and the Path of the Wandering Monk and all that now, we've still got another 18 months of expansions, hero collections, as well as quest packs that are in various stages of development. And they could very well have a tournament expansion that does not play out like a typical HeroQuest expansion. It would be really cool if they did release a set of rules that kind of explained a playthrough of a World's End Tournament scenario. That is something that I think could be very repeatable. It could be here's a way to grow your heroes without having to do campaigns. Something that's a little more randomized. Something that's a little more add as you get stronger in order to make the challenge harder. A bit of a roleplay rule system, I guess, is what I'm describing there. But I don't think that they're going to be coming up with that expansion anytime soon. Let's talk about the East. There are going to be people for whom this style is not for. I said for twice. There are going to be people who don't appreciate the Far Eastern aesthetic. And there are people who have counterpointed kind of early that, just because your fantasy world is set in what looks like something based in medieval Europe, specifically, doesn't mean that there can't be a Far East in that medieval world. These are both valid points. And I think in the coming weeks and months, we're probably going to see a lot of complaints. We'll see a lot of support for and a lot of complaints against the Wandering Monk, just due to the class that it represents, as well as the style, the opening up of the borders of our Western fantasy into lands beyond. I think that if an RPG goes on long enough, it doesn't necessarily have to be inevitable that it opens up into different cultures. I think it could basically always stay one way or another. That doesn't mean that it's good to do so. It doesn't mean that it's bad to do so. There are people that prefer that, and there's nothing wrong with that. Remember, this is very much a preference. This is an option. This doesn't have to be utilized in everybody's HeroQuest game, and it won't be for everybody's HeroQuest game. But at the same time, there are some people who have been waiting for a monk, who would love to play this monk. And in that spectrum, it's not just a one line, here's one side, here's the other. It is more of a two-dimensional spectrum. In that spectrum, there's going to be people that love the idea of the monk, that hate the idea of the abilities here. They would be disagreeing with me on how interesting and cool this mechanic is with elemental styles. And you know what? I'm not going to say they're wrong. It's a preference. It's absolutely fine. They are right because it's their preference. It's an opinion. It's how they like playing the game. I am excited for this character. I'm going to buy this hero collection. I'm going to use them in my games. I'm going to be doing playtests. I'm going to do stuff on the channel with them, and I'm going to have fun doing it. But do I prefer personally Eastern cultures or Eastern aesthetics in my Western fantasy RPG? No, I actually don't. I think they're valid. They have a place. I just don't prefer them. And there's not really a counter argument or counterpoint to that. It's just a statement about my preference. I'm not saying that I don't like that stuff in general. I do. I don't necessarily prefer it in this context. That's all. But this is a lovely sculpt. This is lovely art. This is an awesome looking hero. The abilities look really amazing and very interesting to me. And like I said, I'm intrigued. I want to play this. I want to play this hero in HeroQuest. So talking about Far East and the World's End tournament, what does this mean for us? This is a way to introduce this hero from the Far East who would not likely be in this place. They must have traveled a long way to come to the World's End tournament and somehow meet our heroes. And this could very well be a setup for a tie-in to an upcoming expansion. Not one of the ones that we know about, obviously. I really don't think the Ogre Horde is going to have the monk in it. Man, that would be something. That would actually be... I'm not going to say that would be a terrible idea, to have the monks take up the 3 solo quests that could presumably be at the beginning of the Ogre expansion, and then have the rest of the Ogre expansion play out exactly like it would have back in the day. I won't talk about the body tracker. I won't talk about the modernization of the ogres. I'm just talking about that might be what it takes to fill that expansion up to 10 quests. Not that 7 campaign quests is bad once you consider the US expansions had 7 campaign quests and 3 solo quests to make up their 10. Sorry, it's a point of contention for me. People bring up the 10 all the time. 10, 10, 10. Some of them had 7. Anyways, it's either that or World's End is actually at the far edge where this tournament is being held specifically. It could be at the far edge where the East has more access to it. And this doesn't have to be the East just because they're Asian-centric in appearance. I mean, I say Far East, I'm talking about real world Far East from where I'm sitting. Obviously, that's a relative measurement. If you're in the Far East, then where you're at, it's not the Far East. And in a fantasy setting, of course, this could be the far south. It could be north. It could be west. It really doesn't matter. So I use these terms, but I'm not using them with any sense of authority or claiming that's how it must be. I'm just viewing the tournament as an excuse to get the heroes together. So this tournament happens. It's hinting that there's meta, that there's lore, and that these characters are now part of your party. And it's giving you a great way to justify having these characters in your party as selectable heroes. That's what this is to me. Anything more than that would be just a bonus. All right, so finally, I just want to talk about class systems. That's maybe a whole nother discussion. Folks complained about the monk being, it's a ripoff because, Avalon Hill's just doing the same class system thing that World of Warcraft is doing, that Dungeons and Dragons is doing. That really may be a topic for a whole different podcast, because there's a lot of complexity that goes on in there. It might be simple to some people, but I don't think that take is as complete as it could be. And if it were more complete, it would be a lot more neutral. I think that it's a very incomplete take. I think that there are valid statements as far as, man, this just reminds me of those things, because they like to also take multiple archetypes of different characters. But those archetypes are classes. And a class, used in many definitions, is something from which you make instances, something from which you make other things. And in World of Warcraft and in Dungeons of Dragons, you create a monk, but then now that monk is yours. You don't have to play that character the same way that other people do. There's a multitude of play styles that you can have now. You level this character up, you choose talents on a skill tree, or you take other classes, you spend skill points. It really depends on the game, but to me the most important part here is not that there's a monk, it's a class. Other games have monks as classes, it's not original. That to me is it's a valid opinion, but I don't think it's a very thought out point. The important point, and really the same point that folks who speak out against this are inadvertently making without realizing it, is that the play style is what matters here. And I haven't seen another character in HeroQuest or beyond have this same setup, this same mechanical play style where you use one, now you have to use one of the other two because your first one's exhausted, or you have to wait for the turn cooldown for it to come back. Once you've used all three and have chosen not to recharge them, you have access to the fourth powerful spell set. After you use that, you're in a state of weakness. You are in a state where you have to go either one at a time at the beginning of your turn, so across 4 turns to recover them, or run and just use the abilities that you have as a hero who cannot use these elemental styles until they've recovered. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. That's time for me. I'll be sure to have more thoughts on this as the discussions go on, and I really appreciate your support. Again, thank you to everybody who has supported this channel. Please be sure to give it a like if you did like it. Comment anything you like down below. It really helps out a lot if you want. And that's it from me. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now, brave heroes.